We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff. And Annie, we had a nice podcast planned for today. We had all of our notes ready to go. We were going to talk about Cameron Foster and Reed Trimble being added to the 40-man roster. Enrique Bradfield Jr. wins Defensive Player of the Year in the Arizona Fall League. That's exciting.
Yep.
We hadn't talked about the Andrew Kittredge trade yet. That's exciting. New member of the bullpen. Great. We had all this fun stuff to talk about. We were going to look ahead as the offseason is beginning and free agents are starting to move around. Hey, where do the Orioles need to look in free agency? What holes do they need to address? Do they need an outfielder? Do they need more starting pitching? And then, oh my goodness, last night, if you went to bed early and have just woken up in time for your favorite Orioles podcast, then let me be the first to tell you that the Orioles made a big move last night. They acquired outfielder Taylor Ward from the Los Angeles Angels in exchange for pitcher Grayson Rodriguez. And that is, of course, going to be our topic of conversation for today. Let's just jump right into it. Annie, I guess I'll just start with your initial reaction last night as you were probably getting ready for bed, and then all of a sudden, whoa, here's some news coming across the timeline.
Well, let me tell you, it was weird. I actually fell asleep early. I fell asleep around like 10:30 p.m. I was like, okay, I'm going to hit the hay early. I'm going to wake up early.
One of the least surprising things that you could have said about yourself, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, if you know Annie, you know that, like, that makes sense.
I know,
for
working
you.
in baseball is a little bit tricky sometimes because I'm very much a morning person as opposed to a night owl.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit the hay early. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to finish like writing out some potential free agents that the Orioles could target this offseason, and then I'm going to come into the office ready to go. No, so I fall asleep at 10:30. Weirdly, really strange. My body wakes me up at like 11:15, which is right after.
That was the baseball gods.
Yeah, it was literally the baseball gods. My body had risen and then woken up to see this news. And let me tell you, I was a little out of it because I had been asleep. So I was like, no way, this is too blockbuster to be happening right now at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. But as we were, basically my initial reactions were, okay, I knew that they needed an outfielder or just an impact hitter, regardless. But seeing that it was Grayson Rodriguez was a big surprise because for me, that wasn't really someone that would be on my radar for a potential trade piece or someone that the Orioles would necessarily let go. But when you look further into the details and the numbers of Taylor Ward, you are getting an impact hitter, which basically checks off one of the major offseason needs for the Orioles wish list this winter, but also leaving a lot of money available to go out and get a potential ace or a 1-2-3 guy.
I think my initial reaction was just, huh?
Well, yes, that was also my initial reaction.
Yeah, I had a rec basketball game last night. I get back to my car, look at my phone for the first time. I have a ton of texts, Flex, from people just texting me going, what?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of everybody's initial reaction when you see the name like Grayson Rodriguez. And I think that's something we're going to get into as we have the Grayson Rodriguez conversation, because from the time that I started covering this team and the Orioles were going through a rebuild, the narrative and conversation around Grayson Rodriguez was that he was grouped into a group of players that included Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, the top prospects in this organization. And the conversation was just, man, wait until these guys get out here. For Grayson, it was Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. It was, these guys are the future of the Orioles rotation. Just wait until these two are up here. It's going to fix the rotation for the next 10 years.
Right.
That was the narrative around those two guys. And then Grayson ends up separating himself from DL Hall a little bit, becomes ranked at one point the best pitching prospect in all of baseball, and you always just looked at him as the ace that was promised.
Yeah.
As the guy with just remarkable upside, and then, of course, the injuries become a factor. He never really shows that ace stuff on the mound. He had flashes of it. He had stretches of playing really good baseball. And again, we'll get into all of this when we have the Grayson Rodriguez conversation, but yeah, I think it's just surprising, given the narrative around Grayson and the conversations surrounding him and what his potential upside looks like. Of course, he does have still multiple years of team control. Taylor Ward is only under contract for this season. Yeah, I think the initial takeaway was just, wow, Grayson Rodriguez. And like you said, you just never really think of him as a guy that could get dealt.
Right. And also when it came to looking at potential impact hitters as well, it was a very different kind of class, or at least like the hitter class and position player class in terms of free agents this year is not all that deep. I mean, sure, you have the big name guys like Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, those kinds of guys, Kyle Schwarber, but it wasn't necessarily like, for me, I couldn't pinpoint one specific guy that felt like a really solid fit for the Orioles. So also when you threw in Taylor Ward, I was like, okay, obviously I was looking at the bigger names on the free agent tracker list.
Right.
So you weren't necessarily looking at Taylor Ward, but it makes sense when you see and go deeper into his kind of numbers. Yes, it's different when you are getting a 1-year contract out of a guy in Grayson Rodriguez who had a lot more team control. So that's a very different and part of the surprising aspect of this trade. But I will say that Taylor Ward does check a lot of the boxes, and it kind of solves the issue of not having as deep or as filled of a free agent kind of outfielder impact hitter class compared to like the pitchers in this free agency class now.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. So let's start with the Taylor Ward conversation, and then we'll go into what it means for the lineup and then talk Grayson Rodriguez and what it means for the pitching staff. But let's start with Taylor Ward, because this trade is also really interesting because you're talking about one of the most hyped up pitchers, one of the more hyped up younger guys, and probably one of the most underrated players in baseball in Taylor Ward.
Sure.
36 homers, over 100 RBIs last year. 4 outfielders in baseball put up at least 35 homers and 100 RBIs last year, and that was Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Riley Green, and then Taylor Ward. This has been a consistently good player for the last 4 seasons. Since 2022, his per-season averages 136 games played, 251 batting average, a 332 on-base percentage, 451 slugging, 783 OPS, 117 OPS plus, 24.5 home runs, and over 24 doubles. He is consistently in the 90th percentile or better for chase rate, and again, hit 36 tanks last season. So it's also an average defender. He's kind of an average runner. He's not going to do a ton for you on the bases, and he's going to be a fine left fielder. That's not what you're getting him for. You're getting him to be a middle-of-the-order bat, and he was not a middle-of-the-order bat that most people thought was available, but obviously it's one that becomes available now through trade. He does just have 1 year of team control left. He is in his 3rd year of arbitration. Projections are somewhere between the $12 and $14 million range for his salary this season, depending on where you look. He checks a lot of the boxes for what the Orioles needed. It is a right-handed power hitter who destroys lefties. And when you think about the narrative around this baseball team for the last 2 seasons, it's been largely they can't stay healthy and they can't stay on the field and they haven't gotten consistent production. And then you look at Taylor Ward and you see the games played over the past few seasons and you're looking at 150 plus.
Yeah.
157 in 2025, 156 in 2024, only played in 97 games in 2023, but 135 games in 2022. So this is an everyday player. He, yes, is a corner outfielder. I think this indicates to you that they feel good about Colton Cowser in center field, which they should. He is a good defender there. Middle of the lineup bat with 25 plus, 30 plus home run potential. Yeah, it's not the move you were expecting the Orioles to make, but he checks every box for what we were going to talk about on this podcast, which was what do the Orioles need to get? I had written down an impact outfielder.
Yeah.
Like an impact bat that can make a difference in the middle of the lineup somewhere. And that's exactly what Taylor Ward is.
Yeah, definitely. And even like going through the free agents and kind of trying to find a perfect solid fit, I had a little bit of trouble because you either had guys that would be $40 million annually, or you had Harrison Bader was.
You had Harrison Bader.
He was. That was basically the only one I have highlighted. The other ones were either doesn't give you much defensive value, just maybe a DH, or you had maybe bringing back Cedric Mullins, or trying to throw in a deal for Cody Bellinger, even though you would spend so much money and have a center
that's
fielder.
$30 million a year for Cody Bellinger.
Another lefty outfielder. So it was kind of like nothing was really ticking the box like you mentioned. And I'm really glad you brought up the health and the consistency, because we all know that that's been the key struggle for the Orioles the last 2 seasons, is staying healthy, making sure you have enough depth to stay afloat in a playoff race. This year, you had a very stocked infield. As you knew, you didn't necessarily need to bring in any infielders in the offseason, but maybe some guys with versatility, but also you had the outfield who you lost Cedric Mullins at the trade deadline last year. You lost Dylan Carlson, and then you had Tyler O'Neill, who had another year in him, or 2 years. But then Dylan Beavers came in. So you had your Dylan Beavers, Colton Cowser, Tyler O'Neill as your outfield, maybe a Jeremiah Jackson. But with all the injuries, there is still room to strengthen that outfield and bring in another guy, and also kind of fend off of future injuries and have more opportunity for platoon bats and you name it. So I think Taylor Ward coming in and filling a 4th or 5th outfielder, or being an everyday outfielder and pushing Dylan Beavers a little bit to an outfielder option, Jeremiah Jackson the same way, makes a lot of sense, especially like you mentioned, he is a lefty masher. He has a career .824 OPS against lefties. When you look at where the Orioles were ranked in 2025 against lefties, they were 22nd in that category in all MLB with a .661 OPS. The O's also needed a lot of help with runners in scoring position this year. They ranked 23rd in that category with a .716 OPS. Taylor Ward has a career .809 OPS with runners in scoring position. So I think that this is a guy that brings a lot of oomph from the right side of the bat. He is an impact hitter, brings opportunity in that outfield, whether it's an okay or average defense or not, but also just kind of is there to be a clutch hitter and someone that you need from the right side. And consistency as well. We're getting a lot of comments on YouTube and Facebook because we are live on both of those pages. Again, somebody on YouTube pointing out he has played 150 plus games the past 2 seasons, and that is something that the Orioles have lacked. And you can have a conversation as well in terms of, hey, do the Orioles just need a veteran in the clubhouse? Do they need a stabilizing force in the lineup somewhere? Taylor Ward is going into his 9th season in Major League Baseball. That is a veteran. That is a stabilizing force in the middle of the lineup. And probably going into this offseason, I don't know if you needed an everyday outfielder. That's what you get in Taylor Ward. But you're right in the free agent class. I think if you're Mike Elias and company, you know you have a need for a 4th outfielder before this trade yesterday, right? You just need somebody, okay, maybe they can play some center field. You bring in Taveras, who can play some center as well. Sure. He profiles more as a 5th outfield depth type of player. You know that you would like somebody to be able to maybe play center, who can, spell a Tyler O'Neill if the injury bug continues to plague him a little bit. Dylan Beavers had a nice stretch at times last season. His first month, he was on fire. The second month, not as good. So you needed another rotational guy. And I'm totally with you where the one guy that I looked at was Harrison Bader. And Bader put together a great season last year. It was a 4-WAR season. He hadn't had a season that good since 2021 before that. So there was a little risk that came in signing a guy like Harrison Bader, but that's what you get with any free agent. The top of this outfield class in free agency, like you mentioned, Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, Kyle Schwarber, technically an outfielder as he designated hitter. Trent Grisham accepted his qualifying offer. And then outside of that, Ryan O'Hearn is an outfield option. He was a corner outfielder, but again, another left-handed hitter. The Orioles have a lot of those. Mike Yastrzemski, another left-handed hitter. And then after Harrison Bader, you're looking at some guys that you would really need to have faith in, like a 37-year-old Starling Marte, or maybe Cedric Mullins has a bounce back, or 38-year-old Tommy Pham. Like, there were just not a lot of options after Harrison Bader, and he was the one guy that I circled that would really make sense in free agency, and I think most people had him circled as the one guy that made sense in free agency because he kind of is the tier 2 of outfielder. And we're going to have the starting pitching conversation in terms of what the Orioles could potentially be doing in free agency when we talk about the Grayson Rodriguez side of all of this. But that starting pitching class is really deep. There isn't a Garrett Cole in this class, but there are multiple guys that are going to make somewhere from $100 to $150 million. And then there are a bunch of guys that are going to make
30, 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars. And that tier just doesn't really exist in the position player market. And so if you're looking at guys that you could acquire, you could argue that Taylor Ward is, you can have the Taylor Ward versus Harrison Bader conversation. Taylor Ward only under team control for one more season. He is going to be cheaper than Harrison Bader when you're looking at a total contract. Who knows if Ward, maybe likes it here, has a great season, gets extended. Who knows what the future may hold. But as of right now, you have him for 2026. I think there's a Taylor Ward or Harrison Bader conversation. But if Ward were a free agent, he is very firmly in that second tier of outfielders 100%. That you could sign. Yeah, he's not a Kyle Tucker or a Cody Bellinger, but he is very that he would. So maybe for the Orioles, you're just looking around at the free agent outfielders that you need one of and just going,
I know.
Don't love my options here.
Right, 100%. And I completely echo what you say. If Taylor Ward were a free agent, he and Harrison Bader would have been the two that have circles around it for, okay, maybe the Orioles could go in this direction. I think the only leg up that Bader has is the postseason experience and the Gold Glove. But I think when you get Taylor Ward, you're having a guy that has very similar offensive numbers, especially as of late, but for no money. I mean, yes, it's an even swap with Grayson Rodriguez. You're giving up a guy with a lot of talent and a lot of upside depending on injuries and control, but at the same time, you're getting Taylor Ward, which would have the exact same kind of player profile that checks a lot of the boxes that you're not dipping into your money pool that you could use for pitching. And obviously we will see what the future holds for those kind of moves, but I think that what you get out of Taylor Ward is, like you mentioned, a veteran. There isn't really postseason experience, but at the same time, he slots into this Orioles lineup with the longest MLB service time after Tyler O'Neill, obviously, but that is something that holds a lot of value, especially when you think of the consistency. There's a difference to having service time and amount of years in the major leagues, but being there and staying healthy is really key and something that the Orioles really needed, especially with you don't know how Tyler O'Neill's going to stay healthy and you name it. So having another option to be that everyday outfielder is huge.
There were two hitters in this Orioles lineup last year that you knew were going to be in the lineup every day because injuries just really, really decimated this team. Two guys in this lineup played over 100 games. It was Jackson Holliday and it was Gunnar Henderson. Taylor Ward more than likely is going to play over 100 games next season. He has played 150 plus over the past two seasons. And we're getting a lot of questions on YouTube. Sharky asking what happens with Jeremiah Jackson here, have a spot. So let's have the outfield conversation now because it really expecting. We weren't expecting the Orioles to acquire an everyday outfielder. We kind of figured they would go after more of a depth guy. Taylor Ward, I think, is your everyday left fielder. He does absolutely mash lefties. It's not a super drastic platoon split for him. It is still an above league average OPS against right-handed hitters, but last year the OPS against lefties was over 900. So he is a lefty masher. If he gets days off here and there, it will more than likely be against right-handed pitching. Colton Cowser is your everyday center fielder. I would be surprised if the O's went out and got a different everyday center fielder with this move here. And I think that makes a ton of sense. Colton Cowser has a cannon for an arm. And last year, he was a positive outs above average player in center field. I think a fully healthy Colton Cowser going into 2026, you feel good about as an everyday center fielder. Remember, Colton Cowser only played left field. He was elite at it, but he only played left field because you had Cedric Mullins patrolling center. Colton Cowser was drafted as a center fielder. He played center field throughout his minor league career.
And college.
And he is good enough to be a center fielder. He has been a center fielder for his entire career outside of just bumping to left because the Orioles already had a really good defensive center fielder in Cedric Mullins. So I think you feel fine about Colton Cowser as your everyday center fielder. Hopefully it is a fully healthy 2026. We see a bounce back offensively. You know he's going to be solid there defensively. And then right field, I think you're looking at Tyler O'Neill and you're looking at Dylan Beavers. Does Dylan Beavers maybe slot in as your fourth outfielder, or is he a starter there? I'm not really sure how that is going to pan out. You want to be careful with Tyler O'Neill because you want to keep him on the field as often as possible. It is an impact bat when he is healthy. And so maybe there's a situation there where you're platooning Dylan Beavers and Tyler O'Neill a little bit. O'Neill maybe will serve as your DH a good bit because I think Beavers at this point is probably a better defender in right field than Tyler O'Neill is. So maybe O'Neill is your designated hitter. Just try to keep him on his feet and try to keep him in the lineup as often as possible. Samuel Basallo, I know, will be in that DH conversation as well. In terms of the Jeremiah Jackson question, I think Jackson probably just plays a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah.
He came up through the minors as an infielder. The Orioles only used him as an outfielder because, A, they really needed an outfielder, and B, it was a scenario where, hey, we don't know a ton about you. You haven't played a ton of games in our organization. Go out there and see if you can play right field. So I think we could probably see Jackson in the outfield a little bit, but I think he profiles best as a utility infielder at third base, at second base.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially when this is an offseason where you don't necessarily need to dip into the infield market. You have your infield. It's pretty set. You have first base is either Samuel Basallo, Kobe Mayo. Then you have Jackson Holliday at second base, Gunnar Henderson shortstop, and Jordan Westberg at third. You weren't necessarily going to go out and get a free agent for your infield. Jeremiah Jackson is the perfect type of guy to have on the back burner a little bit if you needed to bring someone in, if you needed to give guys a rest, if you needed some extra kind of thump, because Jeremiah Jackson really proved a really strong campaign when he got brought up to the major leagues this past spring, or I guess summer. So I think that having him as an extra option for the outfield, as an extra option for the infield is really key because, again, the injuries, you can never predict what happens, and having someone that has that versatility, both infield and outfield, is going to be really, really pivotal for the next season.
Yeah, I think he works into that conversation. I would be surprised if we saw him more in the outfield than we saw him a season ago. I think bringing in Leody Taveras to be your fourth, fifth outfielder at this point, like, he is your depth defender there. And then I think Jackson best profiles as a second base, third base type of player.
Also, granted, he still has 3 minor league options. I would love to see him stay at the big league level, but it's not the end of the day. He's still got some flexibility there.
I think he's going to be a factor in 2026, but certainly bringing in Taylor Ward muddies his outlook in the outfield a little bit. I think overall, though, when you're looking at the position player group, I'm not going to say the Orioles are done, but there are not really any glaring holes position player-wise.
Agreed.
I think the outfield was really the only place that you were looking at this offseason where you could say, man, they could really use a number 3, number 4 type of outfielder to supplement Cowser and Beavers and O'Neill. And then they got that in a bigger way than anybody was expecting in Taylor Ward. Outside of this move, I'm not sure if there's a ton to come on the position player front. I think probably the only position that you would look at and say, is there a question mark there, is maybe first base, but there's so much upside there between Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basallo. We'll see what ends up happening with Ryan Mountcastle. There's so much upside there that you don't want to block either of those guys from getting consistent playing time.
Especially with how good Kobe Mayo looked in September, too.
Yeah, and unless you're bringing in like a Pete Alonso, you don't really want to block playing time for those two guys at that position. So when you're looking around the diamond, I don't think there's a ton of question marks anywhere. Maybe there's a possibility to bring in a third catcher if Samuel Basallo was playing a lot of first base. Maybe there's a third catcher there, or maybe it's just Alex Jackson. Maybe he's already on the roster and you tender him a contract. Outside of that, maybe a depth infielder if you're looking for an upgrade somewhere there, but Jeremiah Jackson can play second and third. Do you need a backup shortstop? I think we're going to be having depth conversations about this position player group rather than saying they need to go get an impact bat. They just got one.
Yeah, especially because you feel good with the way the 2026 lineup looks, especially if Tyler O'Neill stays healthy and you can get him out there for a season that has a lot more games than his last 2 seasons. And then with Taylor Ward as well, I think that both of them too, if you have Tyler O'Neill staying healthy, if you have everybody else staying healthy, which obviously is going to be New Year's resolution number 1 for 2026. But so I think that the lineup looks solid. Again, you don't really see any gaping holes. Even at the designated hitter front, you have Adley when Basallo's catching or vice vice versa, or bringing in a righty designated hitter won't hurt because you have an added option for a righty bat when Taylor Ward, Tyler O'Neill, whoever you could slot in there as well.
All right. It's time for the Grayson Rodriguez conversation.
It is the second part of the convo.
Yeah, because to get a really good player in Taylor Ward, you trade Grayson Rodriguez, who will not become a free agent until 2030. And we know the kind of upside that Grayson Rodriguez has. We have seen it at points. He had 20 starts in 2024 with a 3.86 ERA. There were some really good starts mixed in there, even in 2023, in 23 starts, a 4.35 ERA. But you saw it. There was a reason that he was the best pitching prospect in baseball at a point. He was the 6th overall prospect in the game in 2022, according to MLB Pipeline. The 11th overall pick in the 2018 draft, consistently one of the best Orioles prospects. As I mentioned off the top, when you were having conversations about this team in the midst of the rebuild, it was, but just wait until Adley and Grayson and Gunnar and all of those guys get to the big league level. They are going to change things. Grayson Rodriguez, when he was on the mound in an Orioles uniform, as mentioned, pitched well. He showed some ace flashes. But of course, the injury concern is what has plagued his career thus far. And we sincerely hope that it does not continue to plague his career going forward. Nothing but the best to Grayson Rodriguez and his career in LA. But in 2022, you start to see the lat issues flare up. In 2023, he just makes 23 starts, and then in 2024, it's 20 starts because you have the right shoulder inflammation that season, and then you have the lat issue that ultimately ends his year. And then he misses all of 2025 due to injury. You went into spring training last year thinking that the number 1 and number 2 in your rotation were going to be Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez, and you end up not having Grayson for the entire season. It's an elbow inflammation issue, and then the lat issue flares up again, and then it's elbow discomfort, and then eventually he gets season-ending elbow surgery. There was a lot of kind of mystery around the injuries that Grayson Rodriguez had last year just because we didn't get to talk to him all that much, and I think probably the injuries were so up and down in terms of his rehab and what he was able to do and able to not do that the outlook was just really murky, and there were no real timelines, and there was no real outlook for the season. Going into this year, Mike Elias had said that they were hoping he would be healthy and ready to go for spring training, but that he was kind of a wild card in terms of the Orioles rotation. So in terms of Grayson himself, it's kind of funny looking at some of the reactions to this deal and moving Grayson Rodriguez, because I think going into the season, a lot of Orioles fans were saying, well, you can't count on Grayson Rodriguez to be in this rotation next year because he was hurt all of 2025. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then once Grayson Rodriguez gets traded, the reaction is, oh my God, we need so much pitching. We don't have Grayson Rodriguez next year.
Right.
You weren't counting on him in the first place. And of course, the bigger element here is that he has so much team control. He is under team control until 2030. And if he ultimately hits his potential and gets healthy at some point, whether it's this year or the year after that, that is one of the most exciting young arms in baseball. It's also a massive if, and if he gets there. And again, we are hoping the best for Grayson Rodriguez. Hopefully the injuries are behind him and he comes into 2026 and is healthy and shows the upside that he has. But it is such a big if, and I'm sure that's where the Orioles had to operate from, was just, man, that's a big question mark. And Taylor Ward is anything but a question mark.
Yeah, very true. It's funny you mentioned that kind of reaction. The other reactions I wanted to mention were, you have a lot of complaints over the years for, okay, you're holding on to guys for the future. You're holding on to guys for the future. When are you going to make a move for the now? When are you going to make a move for the World Series bid? This very much so is that kind of move. You're not really looking towards the future. Yes, you give up. I think the biggest gut punch is you give up Grayson Rodriguez, who had a lot of upside and a lot of potential, and a lot of team control, but again, it's the big if. Instead, you're making a move here that is sure to bring you consistency in a season where you have to take advantage of all the other guys that you have at their peak. Gunnar should be at his peak this coming year. Trevor Rogers should be again. All those guys. Adley should be making a huge comeback. So 2026 in this scenario is the future. It should be the year where you're making these pivotal short-term moves to make a bid to the World Series. The other kind of gut punch for this is just because of what Grayson Rodriguez has meant to this organization. And like you mentioned, we do wish him the best, but you can never really predict what is going to happen in the future if there's more that lies beneath the surface that we don't necessarily know, because like you said, there's a lot of mystery that lasted in 2024 or in 2025, even from 2023 to 2024, there was a fairly decent jump in his fastball velocity going into 2024. So I think that there are some things that you can say Grayson Rodriguez brought a ton of value to this organization, and you wish him the best with the Angels, a very, very healthy season for 2026 and beyond. But instead, you're making a very real and live in the moment type of transaction in getting Taylor Ward.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the reaction when you see the name Grayson Rodriguez, and you're right. It's a name that has held weight in this organization for a long time. I've mentioned the conversations that Orioles fans often have, especially when Grayson was coming up as a prospect, where you're just like, man, this guy's the future. He is going to be the ace of the rotation for years and years to come. And I think, unfortunately, a trade like this, where you don't want to say you're giving up on Grayson Rodriguez, you're just trading him away, right? It is the culmination of what the reality has been, because the conversation around him forever has just been, this is the ace, this is going to be the anchor, this is going to be the guy, this is for the next 6-8 years, he is going to lead the Orioles to the promised land. And then you look at the reality of the situation, and he hasn't pitched in a year and a half. He missed all of 2025 with elbow issues, with a lat issue that has persisted. Again, we're not far away from 2026, and we're talking about lat issues that have persisted since 2022. And so you have to take the shininess of the name away a little bit in a move like this. It's really hard to do, but you have to, because the reality of the situation is that Grayson was a giant question mark going into 2026. You couldn't operate as if Grayson Rodriguez was going to be in your rotation next season. In the conversation that we were going to have on this podcast about the needs that the Orioles had going into next season, I think the obvious one at the top of the list, along with, maybe a closer in the bullpen, was high-end starting pitching talent. Because you have Kyle Bradish, you're hoping that Trevor Rogers has a repeat performance from 2025. And then outside of those two guys, let's say Rogers takes a step back and becomes a number 3, or just, comes back down to earth a little bit and is a number 2, number 3. You would like another guy to be up there with them. And then at the back end of the rotation, you have a lot of names like Dean Kramer and Tyler Wells, maybe Cade Povich in there as well. So you needed a high-end guy. You need some depth. You needed a lot of work in that starting rotation. But I don't think anywhere in the conversation that we were going to have about it would I have put Grayson Rodriguez's name firmly in that conversation. He was certainly in it.
Yeah.
And I think the conversation around Grayson before this trade, if you were looking at the state of the rotation, just would have been, hey, you know what? If you get something from Grayson Rodriguez in 2026 as a starting pitcher, you feel really good about that.
Yeah.
You feel good that he is back in the rotation and contributing. And if you get something from him, great. But Elias said it too. He was a wild card going into the season. You couldn't operate as if Grayson Rodriguez was going to be in this rotation in 2026. Right now, they obviously are not doing that. He's no longer in the organization, but it doesn't really change, at least for me, your short-term plans.
Yeah.
It might change the long-term plans, and hopefully, Grayson is able to turn things around injury-wise and live up to his potential. And if all of that happens, it of course has changed your calculus in 2027 and 28, 29. You no longer have that guy.
Yeah.
but I don't think it changes the equation for what you needed to do to win more baseball games in 2026. You couldn't operate like you had Grayson.
I personally wasn't even really factoring in Grayson Rodriguez for the front half of 2026, if even the second half. I quite simply wrote out what the rotation looks like right now as Trevor Rogers, Kyle Bradish, 1 and 2, Dean Kramer, Tyler Wells, Cade Povich. I personally didn't even add in Grayson Rodriguez, which is really, it's sad when you look back at it, because this is, like you said, the guy who should have been or could have been an ace caliber type of pitcher, but things did not go the way it could have or go as according to plan for Grayson Rodriguez, as unfortunate as that is for his own personal career for the Orioles. I mean, looking back at it, this was the poster child for the Orioles drafting a pitcher and a homegrown pitcher, or the highest drafted pitcher since 2018 for the Orioles. So there was a lot of weight that held for who Grayson Rodriguez represented and the success that he had, even though it was riddled with a ton of injury. We didn't necessarily get to see him reach that full ceiling that he has, which is, it's really too bad. But I think when you kind of have to play your cards right and play smart in terms of what you can get for the 2026 season, you got to make it back to the playoffs somehow. Taylor Ward gives you a better opportunity to make it to the playoffs in 2026 than Grayson Rodriguez would have.
Yeah, and that's the reality of the situation for 2026. Who knows how this trade will play out in the future, if Taylor Ward has a future in Baltimore beyond this season, if Grayson Rodriguez turns into the type of ace that many people thought he could. In 2026, 2027, and beyond, I think this trade will obviously be evaluated based on what Grayson Rodriguez does in the future. But I think in Taylor Ward, you are getting a consistently good outfielder for the 2026 season. He's going to put up 2 or 3 Baseball Reference WAR. He's going to hit 25 plus home runs. You know what you're getting there, and you had no idea what you were getting from Grayson Rodriguez in 2026. This is a win-now move. This is a kind of chips in sort of move. It is not a chips in sort of move in the same way that the Corbin Burns deal was a few seasons ago. Taylor Ward is not that caliber of player, but Taylor Ward is still a really good player.
Right.
So it is still a chips in move. And as we kind of alluded to earlier with the free agent class, it was not deep in outfielders, but it is deep in starting pitchers.
Yeah.
When you look at the players available that are probably going to make somewhere between the $100 to $150 million range, you're talking about Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, Dylan Cease. And then after that, you have guys like Michael King, Zach Gallen, Lucas Giolito. Mm-hmm. After that, you have plenty of guys that you can take a chance on a shorter-term deal. Zach Eflin, Chris Bassett, Michael Lorenzen, Zach Littell. There are a ton of guys in that group that you could potentially look at as depth pieces. And so, you know, even the top end guys, the Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, Dylan Cease, they are not going to be as expensive as a Cody Bellinger or a Kyle Tucker.
Certainly not.
So to get one of those high quality pitchers, I think that's the top 3 there in Framber, in Ranger Suarez, and Dylan Cease. Michael King, I think, is maybe a little bit on the outside looking in that conversation, but he's right there. There are plenty of guys on the starting pitching market available via trade as well that we have heard rumbles about, whether that's Hunter Green or Mackenzie Gore. There are options starting pitching-wise, and I think the Orioles must feel confident that they can get 1 or 2 of those guys, because I don't think you make this move if you don't have a backup plan for somebody that you are going to bring in for multiple years to be a top end of the rotation type of pitcher. And let's say in a hypothetical scenario, if you bring in a Ranger Suarez or a Framber Valdez, that feels like best case scenario looking at the starting pitching market. But if the Orioles are going to be aggressive there, then all of a sudden for the next bunch of years, you're looking at one of those top free agents, Kyle Bradish, as a 1-2 punch at the top of the rotation. Who knows what Trevor Rogers' future holds? Maybe he gets extended, whatever it may be, if this season turns out to be good. But you have to go after some of those high-end guys, not having Grayson Rodriguez anymore. Because, again, the question marks were certainly there for 2026. Was Grayson really going to be in that rotation conversation for this year? I don't really think so. You couldn't plan that way. But you can still plan for the future if you go out and get a high-end free agent that is going to be on this team for years to come.
Yeah, I think that a move like this definitely has to work in conjunction with another bigger move because I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. You make a move like this. Yes, you give up a guy with team control in Grayson Rodriguez, but you didn't spend any money on someone that also checked off a big box in your offseason wish list. It was how we ranked it, at least, was front end of the rotation, a closer, and then an impact hitter, and then kind of going back to more depth pieces at the back end of the rotation, more reliever depth. So you filled one of your top 3 needs this offseason in an impact hitter without dipping into your pool that you could have used for a starting pitcher or front end of the rotation.
Right.
So I think that is probably one of the biggest takeaways. There's a lot of room. It's a long off season still, and a lot of really big names that they could make a case for this off season. And I also think it's important to note, you and I were having this conversation before when we first got in this morning, of the smart moves that Elias has made in the past, where it was a bit of a gamble, like Kyle Stowers, for example, who still had a lot of upside and a lot of control left in exchange for Trevor Rogers. Nobody thought that was going to be a good deal for the Orioles. People said it was the worst trade in Orioles history. You got Trevor Rogers in return. I think that there's a lot to be said for what Elias and the front office think the Orioles can get out of Taylor Ward in exchange for Grayson Rodriguez, who wouldn't be able to help you in your 2026 campaign, even though there was control.
Yeah, I think especially on the trade market, Mike Elias has earned the benefit of the doubt in these sorts of moves. You even look at some of the bigger trades that he has made, sending Joey Ortiz and DL Hall to Milwaukee in exchange for Corbin Burns. Of course, that doesn't work out in the way that you really wanted it to in terms of playoff success, but Corbin Burns was everything you could have wanted. Yep. He was a top 10 Cy Young type of guy, and he delivered an absolute gem in the postseason. You just didn't hit. Yeah. That postseason loss wasn't on Corbin Burns. And then in Joey Ortiz and DL Hall, those are 2 nice pieces, and those are 2 guys that would certainly contribute on this big league roster. But Joey Ortiz, I really like him as a player. He is an elite defender. He was really not a good hitter last year. He had a .593 OPS. DL Hall has still a ton of upside, and like Joey Ortiz, does not become a free agent until 2030. There's a lot of team control there. He had a 3.49 ERA last year, which is pretty good in 20 games. But you gave that up for Corbin Burns. And so I think, again, Elias just gets the benefit of the doubt here, for me anyway, in a lot of these moves. And we don't know all the medicals for Grayson Rodriguez. We're not going to sit here and speculate what his elbow looks like going into next season and seasons after that. But I think this organization has earned the right to be like, okay, let's wait this one out here, and we'll see what the future holds for Grayson Rodriguez. But look, trades with the Angels have gone pretty well in the past as well. Remember where Kyle Bradish came from.
Yeah, so exactly.
That has worked out fine. In terms of the broader pitching rotation conversation, again, I don't think it changes a ton for 2026. You'll figure out 27 and 28 and 29 and 30 when you get there, right?
Yeah.
But going into next season, let's talk about a hypothetical here where instead of going out and trading for Taylor Ward, you had spent $30 million on Harrison Bader.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that anymore because you just traded for Taylor Ward, who is not as expensive as a free agent outfielder that you would have had to sign.
Right.
In theory, you could take the money that you saved from not signing a Harrison Bader and put it towards signing another free agent starting pitcher. And let's say that the plan all along was to sign, hopefully, one of the top end guys, and then maybe another pitcher after that. You now have the money to do that because you didn't have to go out and sign a free agent outfielder. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Orioles are now targeting 2 free agent starting pitchers, because that is the clear and obvious need that they now have. We talked about the position players and the fact that they might not do a ton else on the position player front, and I don't really think that they need to. The starting rotation is the place where you need to get some work done. There are guys there on the back end like Tyler Wells and Dean Kramer and Cade Povich that provide good depth and provide potential upside there, maybe Albert Suarez as well. but you need to supplement Bradish and Rogers at the top, and you need to supplement the depth guys. Mm-hmm. And now the Orioles kind of have two tracks in this offseason. It's get starting pitching help and get bullpen help. They have already addressed the bullpen a little bit with Andrew Kittredge, which was a move that we didn't really get to talk about because it got a little bit overshadowed by the move last night, but that is a good pickup for the Orioles. He was solid for them last year, solid for Chicago, and now he comes back to Baltimore and helps stabilize that bullpen a little bit. You still need a closer, and you still need some more guys there. Yep. But you can go pretty heavy after pitching in this offseason, whether that's free agency, whether that's trades. The rotation right now, I think you feel solid about Bradish. You feel solid about Rogers. You feel solid about Kramer. And then, is Tyler Wells a starter going into next year? That's the age-old conversation that we have with him. If he is, he looked good at the end of last season. Maybe Tyler Wells is your number 4 starter. You need one more guy, at least. You probably need 2 more guys, and then you probably need 3 because you need depth. So that's where the Orioles are going to be focused. Does this trade change the calculus for 2026? No. But you're probably going after guys, if it is a high-end starting pitching talent, you're going after guys that are going to be under team control for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Probably is a contract you're handing out. So it's going to impact your future, the moves that you're making in this offseason. Obviously, moving Grayson does as well, but maybe you're bringing guys in that have that future staying power as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's the bottom line is you have a lot more flexibility to dip into the starting rotation and the bullpen because if you even take a look at last year, the kind of offer and contract that they offered Corbin Burns was a lot more and a lot longer than people would have expected this organization to offer. Yeah. So I think you take a look at that on top of where they are in the offseason and how the position player group has shaped out, how the lineup looks. You have a lot more space and a lot more room to get your front end of the rotation piece, your back end, your closer, maybe another bullpen guy after that. That's probably your 4 remaining needs because they've checked off a good amount of the offseason list right now. You had the manager search, which is checked. The coaching staff is still getting finalized and the details completely confirmed. But you also now have checked the box for position player and an impact hitter. Andrew Kittredge, like you said, Dietrich Enns as well, another move in the bullpen. But so I think that the exciting and big splash names have yet to come.
We're getting some interesting comments on Facebook here. I think you're totally right in that the Orioles, they have a track this offseason. It's going to be starting pitching. It's going to be bullpen. I want to address some of the comments we're getting on Facebook, and they are about Taylor Ward and his swing and miss. And yes, he did strike out 175 times last season, and a .317 on-base percentage is not the best on-base percentage in the world. Did you miss the part where he played over 150 games, where he hit 36 home runs, drove in 103 RBIs, and had a 792 OPS? Batting average is important. I'm not going to sit here and say that batting average does not matter. Batting average does not matter as much as OPS. OPS is the hitting metric that you should be looking at if you are evaluating a hitter. He had a 792 OPS last season, a 116 OPS plus, 36 home runs, and played in 157 games. If I see one more comment on Facebook about the fact that he had a 228 batting average and 175 strikeouts and swings and miss a lot, by the way, he is consistently in the 90-plus percentile in chase rate in baseball, so he is a patient hitter. He took 75 walks last year as well. I know the on-base percentage isn't outstanding. Taylor Ward is a middle-of-the-lineup hitter who just showed that he could hit over 30 home runs and drive in over 100 with an OPS close to 800. We are not playing baseball in 2005, where batting average is the only thing we're looking at. I'm sorry. It's an 800 OPS and 36 tanks.
Yep.
I get it. I know that people want to see the ball put in play, good batting average, and okay, if you don't like OPS and home runs, I don't know what to tell you. Over 100 RBIs, over 150 games played, 800 OPS. Those are all good things. Do I care that he hit 228? Not really. He's a career 247 hitter. The batting average went down a little bit last year. The power numbers went up. we're getting comments on Facebook that he's just a swing and miss guy. How is trading for a 250 hitter a good pickup? Because he hits home runs.
Yeah.
He puts runs on the board, which is the point of the game.
Yep. And what I also think is important, too, is the clutch hitting ability. A career in, 8 seasons? A career OPS with runners in scoring position of 809. One of the biggest faults the Orioles offense had this 2025 season was not being able to play in big moments, to bring runners in with runners in scoring position. That was one of the biggest struggles this offense had in 2025. You're bringing in a guy that in 440 games with runners in scoring position has an 809 OPS. On top of also that walk rate that you mentioned with Adley, Dylan Beavers, and Taylor Ward all together, each of them have a walk at a rate of above 11% in 2025. Jackson Holliday was also on the come up when it came to drawing walks. So if you thought about getting on base, you're also getting on base through Taylor Ward in terms of the plate discipline. Sure, it's the striking out, but in terms of walking and not chasing and also hitting home runs, you have that out of Taylor Ward.
I'm sorry.
There's only so much we can say, Brendan.
The OPS is good. The power numbers are good. He had 70 extra base hits last year. I don't know what else you want me to say. Yeah, the batting average wasn't great. He was in the 17th percentile in expected batting average last year. He was also in the 92nd percentile in chase rate, the 82nd percentile in walk rate, and hit 36 tanks.
Yep.
I don't know what to tell you if that's not a hitter that you want on your baseball team.
I'd also like to put into perspective that adding Taylor Ward into the lineup, immediately he has the second best wins above replacement in the lineup after Gunnar Henderson. So I don't know
what else you want us to tell you about Taylor Ward. He has been a consistently good player for 4 straight seasons. And he is probably going to be a consistently good player next year. I think you know exactly what you're getting in Taylor Ward. Is he going to hit 36 home runs again? I don't know. That was a career high. His previous career high before that was 25. Even if he hits 25 homers next season, he's going to hit 25 doubles. He's going to have an OPS right around 750. That is a good hitter. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. And didn't we say that Gunnar and Jackson Holliday were the only two that played almost the entire season?
They were the only 2 hitters in the lineup that played over 100 games last season.
It wouldn't hurt to have a third guy that plays
a guy
more
that
than
played
157
games last year and 156 the year before. Yeah, I don't think that hurts. And again, I think this trade in general, as we bring it back around from my rant about stop paying so much attention to batting average before I freak out. If we're bringing it back around, yes, this is going to be a trade that is evaluated for years to come because there is such a giant question mark on Grayson Rodriguez. Is he ever going to truly be that ace that posts 30 times a season and gives you a sub-3 ERA with over 10 Ks per 9? I don't know. The Orioles don't know. No teams around baseball knows. The Angels don't know. The Angels are hopeful, but the Angels don't know either.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe we'll look back on this trade in years and have a different evaluation of Grayson Rodriguez than we have right now. We certainly will, one way or another, right? We'll look back and say, man, it sure is a shame that Grayson Rodriguez just couldn't stay healthy. Or we'll look back and say he was healthy sometimes, and he was great when he was on the field. Or we'll look back and say, man, he turned into an ace, and I can't believe that happened, right? There's such a giant question mark there. But what we do know is that going into 2026, the Orioles have the same starting pitching questions that they had before. Maybe the calculus changes in the rotation for years to come, but going into next season, it is the same question marks that they had 48 hours ago. The question marks in the outfield aren't really there anymore. The question marks in the lineup, I don't know. You can evaluate the guys that are here, but I think these are probably going to be the guys that are here. And you have added an 8-year veteran who has played consistently good baseball over the past 4 seasons into an outfield rotation that needed a stabilizing presence and a lineup in general that needed a stabilizing presence, somebody that has stayed healthy, has put up good numbers over the past 4 seasons. That is who you get in Taylor Ward.
Yeah.
But either way, I still think it's a shocking move just when you see the name Grayson Rodriguez and the conversations that we have had about him over the past few seasons. But if you're looking at 2026, I think it's a move that makes the Orioles better next season. Who knows what the future holds? But going into next season, I think the Orioles are a better team because of this trade, because Grayson was just such a big question mark.
Yeah, it is 100% a move that helps the Orioles' case for getting to the playoffs in 2026, more so than keeping Grayson Rodriguez would have done. I think like you said, it's a very shocking and surprising move, something that you and I definitely wouldn't have expected or put on our bingo cards for the 2025-26 offseason for the Orioles, is dealing Grayson Rodriguez away, but you wish him the best regardless. You hope that he stays healthy, but you also hope that you can get the same consistency out of Taylor Ward, the same offensive production out of Taylor Ward that we've seen from him in recent seasons and his whole career, really. This is a lefty masher, someone that can be a clutch hitter, and someone that has played 150-plus games in almost every season. And
shout out G-Man on YouTube. Love a good
I saw that
rant.
too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Moving forward, like we said, there are 2 avenues that the Orioles are going to go. It's going to be bullpen help, and it's going to be starting rotation help. I think starting rotation help now probably more than ever, even though your 2026 plans don't really change. It's going to be, how do we make this rotation better for 2026 and beyond? And then I think there's going to be some bullpen supplementation as well. But those are going to be the moves that we are looking for after a big move last night. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us live on our YouTube and Facebook channels. As always, I'm sorry if I yelled at you. It happens sometimes. But we are live Wednesdays at 11 a.m. on those 2 platforms, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. We are going to be off next week because it's the day before Thanksgiving, and go hang out with your family. You don't want to hear from us. We're also going to go hang out with our families because it's the day before Thanksgiving. So we will be away next week, but then after that, I think we're going to be full steam ahead until the holidays inevitably hit again and we take a week off somewhere.
This is a little bit of a choppy time of year. But
we've been sporadic.
There will be news that you can follow along with.
And when there is big news, we are here, and that's what we are here for. So hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.